Hello everyone. This is going to be a somewhat comprehensive tutorial on how you can edit the front trainer sprites in Pokemon Black and White 2, and specifically for those games, how you can remove the animation associated with the trainer, so you can add whatever sprite you want without it breaking, basically. This is not going to teach you how you can add your own custom animations or how you can make a sprite edit using a current animation, an existing animation, but I will try to make this tutorial as basically as easy to follow and as easy to understand as possible, so you can sort of understand how these things work too, and maybe you can experiment with it as well if you want to. So you're gonna want to download the RAR file I left in the description. I'm gonna try to leave it in a link that won't break, because I'm basically making this tutorial because this is an issue I've had, and there basically is no place in the internet explaining how to do this. I had to do a lot of digging and a lot of discovering myself. So I just hope that this tutorial will help someone in the same situation as me. And I noticed that's a problem with a lot of old video game modding tutorials. Links tend to break, so if any link is broken, please do let me know in the comments. If you also have any questions after the tutorial, or if something breaks, you can also leave those questions in the comments. Please do only ask questions if they haven't been answered in the video. I want to help as many people as possible, but I also don't want to basically clog the comments with unnecessary questions. So let's begin. You're going to want the RAR file. You're going to want your own ROM of Pokemon Black 2 or White 2. I can't give you this. Even if I gave you a link, it would probably be taken down. So Google's your friend. Try to find your own ROM to use here. And you're also going to want Desmume or Desmume. I don't know how it's spelled or how it's pronounced, but we're going to want that just so we can test our mods out. We're going to want to extract the RAR. I'm going to assume you have some basic knowledge of how modding games for Generation 5 or just in general work. You don't need to be particularly knowledgeable about it. Just if you have never messed with any of this before, I definitely recommend you start with something else a little bit more easy to change, since this is going to go into changing some, replacing some files, and it might be confusing for someone who has never done any of this before. So I recommend you watch other tutorials first if this is your first, but if it isn't, then let's proceed. So after you have extracted your tools, you're gonna notice there's a bunch of things here. First, these two programs, Kiwi DS Editor and Nitro Explorer 2B. Nitro Explorer is so we can extract the narcs, and Kiwi so we can later recompress the narcs, since we're going to uncompress them. You'll see how we're going to use them later. You'll notice we have Black and White Sprite Editor. This is what we're going to use to edit the sprites, but before we edit the sprites, we're going to remove the animation before we even edit the sprites. I believe you can do it the other way around, but I just prefer it this way, since in my personal experience, which I've messed a lot with this to kind of understand how it works, I think the sprites are way less likely to break if you remove the animation before messing with the sprite itself, but theoretically you can do it in whatever order you prefer. And then you'll notice we have two versions of Tink. So, fun fact, this is like the 5th time I've recorded this tutorial from the beginning, because I've kept having issues with Tink. And I did not put 2 different versions of Tink here on accident. We're going to use 2 different versions of the same goddamn program for different things. And I know that sounds kind of stupid, but Tink is not a perfect program, and it's definitely not new either, so it's bound to have some issues. And different versions of Tink happen to have different issues. So we're going to want to use firstly this one for something in the beginning, and then we're going to want to use this one for replacing files. And then we have these 2 files, which I will get into later what they are for. But first things first, you're going to want to open Nitro Explorer. You're going to want to load ROM, and you're going to look for your ROM. This is my ROM of Y2. And you're going to want to open it, and then you'll go to A071. A071. These are the front trainer sprites for Pokemon Black and White 2. If you go to Black and White Sprite Editor, you can see there's a README here. It says where the Pokemon and front and back trainer sprites are for Pokemon Black and White 2. What we're editing here specifically is this, Black and White 2 front trainer sprites. This is the NARC. NARC is short for Nintendo Archive, which is basically a file system for Nintendo DS games. This is a NARC that has every front trainer sprite and everything related to them. You're going to want to extract this. And you can name it whatever, but I suggest you name it A071.narc. A071 because that's the NARC we're editing. And this is extremely important. Do not forget to do this. You have to manually add .nrac narc at the end of the file because the program doesn't know which type of file it is. You have to say it's a narc file. So you're going to want to save that. Now we can close this, and you can see we have the narc file here. We could technically use Tink to extract the narc as well, but as I just said, Tink is very broken in some ways, so I found that using Nitro Explorer is just very much safer than using Tink directly. So now, first we're going to want to open this version of Tink, 0.9.2, the more recent one. Because what we're going to do here is we're going to basically replace the animation files. You're going to want to open A071 narc. We're going to replace the animation files with ones that basically tell the sprite to have no animation. And when you extract this, this is going to look a little scary at first if you've never seen this or you don't understand how this works. This is going to look a little confusing. It did for me at first, but I'm going to explain this to you. Keep this open, keep everything open, but go back to Tools and open Black and White Sprite Editor. And then in the program, select the folder and go to the folder I left in the Tools folder called Extracted Sprites. You normally would have to extract this yourself, but to make things easier, since we're not editing the sprite itself yet, we're just gonna look at something. I've extracted them beforehand and put them in the folder with everything else. So when you open this, you're gonna see these are all the sprites that are in the game, right? So for the sake of this tutorial, we're gonna want to edit, I believe it's this one. Yes. We're gonna want to edit the cheerleaders. We're gonna want to edit their sprite. We're gonna want to replace them with a sprite of the Fun Gang from Deltarune, which one of my lovely friends has made. We're gonna want to replace it with this in this tutorial. So all we're gonna want to do with a black and white save editor now is we're going to keep this in mind, ID 68, and we're going to take the time now that we have this open. We're going to export this image, and you can name it whatever. I'm gonna name it cheer or 68 maybe, because that's the ID. You're just gonna want to export it so we add it later, but just keep this here for now, just so you know. Just keep this number in mind. We have number 68, right? So let's go back to here to think. So the way this works, the sprites work in this game is basically each sprite in the game has 8 files associated with it. So you can see here file 0 through file 7, these 8 files make up the first ID here. They make up Nate. So what are these files? Let's start from the beginning. This file, the first file, which is a bin file, and the fourth file, 0 and 3 here, are both to do with animation. So maybe an easier way to explain this would be, this bin file is the sprite sheet itself. This thing here, this image, is this. Then this RECN is basically a cell file, which means it essentially takes this, it divides it into body parts. As you'll notice, head 2, it gives them names. So it divides this into head 1, head 2, hair, bag, torso, hand 1, 2, 3, whatever. And then these 2 files basically get instructions on how to move these body parts, and they make the animation. Because the way this game makes animations, unlike you might think it works, it doesn't have the animations frame by frame. What it does is it has body parts divided like this, and it takes those body parts and it tells it how to use them, how to play with those body parts to move them. It's basically like a puppet. It puppeteers these different body parts to move around. And then this sprite here in the right hand corner is basically what's shown at the end of battles, because when you defeat a trainer, it pans back a little bit to show the trainer again, and they don't do their animation twice. They basically just have in the same sprite sheet and the full sprite, and when you end the animation, when you end the battle, the animation files tell the sprite sheet to just show this part. That's basically how that works. Then RCMN, RAMN, and this bin, these 3 files, I can't explain you too well how they work. I know this has something to do with cell and the dividing of these things, and this has something to do with animation, and then this relates to these 2 as well. I don't understand too well how they work, but I know they are also essential for the sprite sheet to divide in different parts and stretch certain body parts or squish them, or basically every time a sprite is distorted in some way. I think these are the files that deal with that. And then the last file is a RLCN, which, as you might have guessed from the icon, is basically just the palette. The way palettes work in this game is each sprite has access to up to 16 colors. I believe that's how that works. But you do have to keep in mind one of those colors, of those 16 colors, which I believe is always the first slot here, is the color of the background, which the game translates to transparency. And it's dependent on each sprite. So if I go to a random sprite here, okay, this is not the best example. Okay, good, perfect. You can see here Bryson Man. Bryson Man, for his sprites, uses a gray background. And that's the color that's, in his palette, the first color would be, the first color here would be this gray, and that's how the game knows that that's the background to make that transparent. So if I go here, for example, and I look at this, you can view here some of the files. If I go to the color palettes, you can see these are the exact same colors that are here. The same green for the background, the same blues for the outfit, the black for the white, the tones of white and gray for the pants and the arms, the skin color and the red for the hat and the face and the arms. These are the same colors, so you can see this is from here to here. This is Nate. This is what takes care of Nate's front battle animation, front battle sprites, animation, the sprite sheet, everything. Now let's go to the one I want to edit. In this case, the cheerleaders. You can see their ID 68, right? We know each sprite here is 8 files. So what we're going to want to do is get our calculator, use your phone calculator or your computer calculator or whatever, and you're going to want to do your ID, so 68, and you're going to want to multiply that by 8, since, we take the file into consideration. And now it's going to give us 544. So if we go here to 544, where is it? 544, here, you can see. It's A071/544. You might see, remember, each sprite has the same order. The files are always in the same order, so it always ends with the color palette. So 544 is the beginning of a new set of 8 files that make up a sprite. So with this, we now know that from 544 all the way to 551, which is the color palette, is what we're going to want to edit. This is our cheerleader sprite. If I go, for example, here, and I show you the sprite, you can see too well, but you can tell this is the same tones of yellow and blue and brown that are used here as well. So what we're going to want to do now is, you can close this now. We just needed to know from where to where our file was. We know it starts at 544. This is the first file. Remember, this is the sprite sheet, the image itself, and this is what divides it into little pieces. So we're not going to want to edit this. We're not going to want to edit this, and we're also not going to want to edit the color palette, because when we use a black and white sprite editor, these three are going to change, and we're going to do that later. So keep these three intact. We're going to change this and this later, and this is useless, basically. You're going to tell the animation not to bother with any body parts, so you don't need to change this at all, so just ignore it. We're going to start with the first bin file. And now you'll notice in the tools, I also left missing no files. I'm going to basically quickly explain how this, where I got this. So you might have seen earlier in the README from the black and white save editor, you have an arc for trainer front sprites, trainer back sprites, and Pokemon sprites. Pokemon black and white has a Pokemon sprite occupying the first slot, which is essentially just generation 5 missing no. I'll probably leave an image now on screen somewhere. It's essentially like a question mark. It's sort of the same as in generation 3. And we're going to want to use missing no's files because missing no here has no animation in this game. He's basically the only sprite in this game of this sort of sprites we're editing that has 0 animation. So we're going to use that to our advantage. We're going to basically get missing no's animation sprite files, and we're going to put it on our sprite that we want to edit. So one bin is the first file, where is it? The first file here. So you're going to want to go to the first file here, the first binary, or the first bin, sorry, and you're going to want to change file, and you're going to want to go to missing no files and replace it with one bin, the first bin. Remember, ignore this, this is the third bin, right? 1, 2, 3. The third bin we're going to want to change with the third bin here. And then, remember, this is also a bin. It doesn't have the icon, but this is also a bin. We're going to want to replace this as well with 4 bin, the last bin we have. And then we're going to replace RCMN with RCMN. And we're going to replace RAMN with RAMN. After we've done all this, and this is extremely important as well, pay attention to this part, we're going to want to pack. Do not forget, we're going to click on A071 and we're going to pack it. We unpacked it and now we're going to repack it. This basically saves the files we just changed. And we started with Tink 9.2 because if you did this in version 8.2, this would basically not save correctly for some reason. Tink just has some things like these. But since this is the more recent version, you're just gonna want to extract the file here. And you're gonna want to, where it asks you if you want to extract the uncompressed folder or the compressed file, we're gonna want to have the uncompressed folder, but we can uncompress it in this version of Tink, and I'll explain why later. So now you're just gonna want to say no. Say no. And now this is also important. So you see, we were editing this snark here in the tutorial file. You cannot save any file related to this. So we're editing A071 narc. You cannot save A071 narc file or an A071 folder in the same location as the one we're editing right now. It will basically abort if you try to do that. It won't save. So we're going to go here to tools and we're going to save there. So we wanted the folder and it asked us if we wanted the folder and we said no. But why did we say no? Because we're going to want to do that with Tink 8.2. We're going to go back in versions now. We're going to open this one. We're going to open the narc we just created. This one. I recommend maybe deleting the one you just previously used. We want the one we just edited. This is the one we want to work with. So you're going to want to select this, and you're going to want to unpack it and pack it again. And now you're going to want to extract it and say yes, because we want a folder. Now, why did we not just do this in the other version? Because from version 8 to version 9, Tink changed some of its naming conventions. As you might have noticed here, the files are named file 1, 2, 3, 4, and in the other, they were like A071/0/1. They changed the way the files are named. And Black and White Save Editor looks for files that are named this way, file 1, 2, 3. So that's why we want to extract it using Tink 8.2, basically. We're going to want to go to our file. And now remember, you cannot save this. We have our narc now in the tools folder. So you cannot save this in the tools folder. We're going to save it in the tutorial folder. You're going to want to save it in a different folder than the one where the thing you're editing is in. And now if we go here, you're going to notice we have this. This is all you want. We're basically almost there. What we have left to do is you can close this, and we're going to open Black and White Sprite Editor, and you're going to select the file we just created, the A071 narc. And it's gonna give you this prompt because the file needs to change some of the names so it doesn't get confused. You're just gonna want to say yes and then start. It's just gonna rename files. And now we basically have what we had before. But one important thing to keep in mind is if we had this open before, why did we just do this? Remember, we just removed the animation. That's why we did this. So now that the animation is removed, we would go on to edit the sprite itself. But before we do that, I'm going to quickly just show you what would happen if I just reinserted the narc into the game as it is now. I'm just going to show you what would happen if I just put everything back together right now, just so you know this is working and to understand what we just did, basically. So I'm here in the game. I'm in front of the cheerleaders, and we're gonna see what we just did, what it just did in game, what the effects of what we just did is in game. So if I go into a battle, you will notice this monstrosity. So as you can see, the sprite does not move at all. It just stays still. And let me quickly finish this battle, just so I can show you. If I do this, when the battle ends, normally it would show that little sprite to the right side. But now it's just going to show the exact same thing it showed in the beginning, because it just has no instructions, so it just shows the top left corner, basically. So that's what's happening right now. We just removed all animation, and the game is simply showing the top right corner of the sprite sheet. So good. We removed the animation. All that's left to do is basically replace the sprite sheet with our own custom sprite. Okay, so we're back here, and we have Black and White Save Editor open, and we exported this before, we could export it here now, but you're gonna want to open the thing that you're gonna edit. And now, I have some things to say. So I have this template here. I did a lot of experimenting and I figured out what the size of the bounding box was in game, and you can basically fit a sprite that's that you can basically put in any custom sprite that fits this 96 by 96 square. This is the space you have for your sprite, basically. And another thing about the color palettes, keep in mind the maximum number of colors you can have is 15 per sprite, plus one background color, which in this case is this green, as you can see here. So keep that in mind. And also, I believe, I'm not too sure about this, sometimes it can just mess up, but from what I've been testing, try to keep this, basically these first sprites on the top left corner, try to keep them transparent, the color you're going to want to have on your transparency, because if they're a different color, the program, the black and white sprite editor, might think that's the color you want for transparency, and it can just mess things up. So that shouldn't be an issue, but keep that in mind. We're gonna want to, you could theoretically change the color of the background, but I highly recommend you don't do so, because even if you want to use a very similar color, you can basically just use a color that's one value different, one RGB value different. So say this is 72550, you could use or 70250, you could use 712550, for example. Just use a very similar but not exactly the same color, because I highly recommend you don't change the background color, or you might confuse the program on which color is supposed to be the background color. But what we're going to want to do is basically, if you're on Paint, I recommend you basically grab the color drop tool, right click on the background so it changes color 2, and color 2 is basically the color of the eraser and stuff like that. And then you can just select everything here and then just delete it, and it'll just make the whole thing green. And now remember, the game is using a space of 96 by 96 on the top left corner. So that's your bounding box. This is the, sorry, not, okay, yeah, this isn't exact, but you get the idea. It's 96 by 96, starting from the top left corner. That's the space you have to put your sprite on. So I'm going to grab this sprite here, this lovely sprite made by one of my friends. You can Control A when you're on Paint to basically select the entire image, in case you wanted a shortcut for that. And I'm gonna go here and I'm going to paste it. This, I'm pretty sure this has already been scaled to fit the 96 by 96. I can check. Yeah, 96 by 96. And then all I'm gonna have to do here is just grab the bucket tool and change the background here. Be careful not to miss any spots. I think Ralzai has a little spot there. Yes, there we go. So I think this is it. This is what I'm gonna want to export. Now, keep in mind, we've worked with the limited color palette, and in its entirety, I believe this doesn't use more than like 14 different colors. But remember, never, you can go under, but you can never go over 15 colors. You have 15 colors and the background color. That's all you have to work with. So now this is what I'm gonna want to insert, right? I'm gonna want to save this, and now back in black and white's sprite editor, since we never closed this, we're gonna want to import image here, and we're going to import our custom sprite, right? And now this basically already replaced the file inside this folder, so you can just close this now. All we have to do now, we're very close to the end. All we have to do now is make this a narc file again and not a folder, and then reinsert it using Nitro Explorer. So we're going to open Kiwi, and we're going to go here to Tools. This is important. We're going to go here to Tools and make narc file. And you're going to want to, on the source files folder, you're going to want to open the narc folder, right? The one we just edited with the sprites. And on the output folder, it's going to spew out a narc file, a A071 narc file. So I recommend, if, for example, my A071 narc is here, so I'm going to make it, I'm going to create the narc file in the tutorial folder and not the tools folder. Yeah, keep that in mind. Try not to put it in the same folder where another another file with the same name is. So we're gonna want to go sorry. So we're gonna want to go to tutorial, and I'm gonna want to drop it here. So I'm gonna say OK, and now we press OK. And as you can see, hello. Okay, so it for some reason wasn't creating it in this folder. I have no idea why that never happened to me, but whatever. I just created it in the desktop. Oh, it thinks it already has a. Oh, okay. So yeah, see, this has the exact same name as the file, so that's why it was giving me the error. Okay, so yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind. Maybe make a new folder and extract to that new folder. So now this is the final step. We have the narc, the edited narc, and all we have to do left, you can close Kiwi now, is go to Nitro Explorer, get your ROM, and you're going to want to go back to A071, like in the beginning. And now instead of extracting, we're going to reinsert it. And now this is it. You grab the narc we just created, and you reinsert it. And that's it. The ROM is already updated. We have successfully injected it. We have successfully edited the sprite. If we go in game now, sorry, wait, wrong thing. Okay, if we open our ROM now, you're gonna see, if we enter a battle with the cheerleaders now, they should have the custom sprite now. There we go. Maybe we're gonna have to change that a little bit, but this was just for tutorial's sake. So you can see we successfully inserted it it's working in game and it's not doing any animation, so it's not breaking. It's working when the battle ends as well. There. So that's great. We just did what we wanted to do. If you have any questions to something I might have not have explained too well, or if there's any issues that are happening and you can't fix them, you can leave comments in the comments below. You can ask your questions. I'm not 100% sure I'll be able to answer them, but I'll try to help as many people as I can. And I hope this is helpful to at least some of you. If you need to ask a question, leave a comment. Even if this video is very old, like if you're viewing this like, I don't know, 5-6 years after it's been published, don't be afraid to ask the question. If it's still up and if I can still remember how to do it, I'll always try to help if I can, of course. So I hope I was able to help at least one other person out there who was having the same issue as me. Since these games aren't modded all too often, but I just wanted to create this in case anyone had the same problem I had, basically. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next, I guess.